film begins in 1954 with the security hearings of noted physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy, Admiral Louis Strauss, Robert Downey Jr., accompanied by his entourage Alden Ehrenreich, takes action against Oppenheimer at the Senate hearings. The story goes back and forth in the following years, as Oppenheimer believes he has communist ties and harbors a personal grudge stemming from a meeting between the two in 1947. Strauss tried to recruit Oppenheimer for a post at Princeton University. Oppenheimer makes condescending remarks about his career as a straw shoe salesman, after which Strauss watches as Oppenheimer talks to Albert Einstein. Tom Conti. Strauss tried to greet Einstein, but the man did not recognize him, and Strauss continued to believe that Oppenheimer had told Einstein something about him. In 1924, Oppenheimer began studying physics at Cambridge with Patrick Brackett, James Dossey. Oppenheimer wanted to attend a lecture by Niels Bohr Kenneth Branagh, but Brackett allowed him to leave and finish work on the project. Oppenheimer entered the closet, injected potassium cyanide into an apple on Brackett's desk, and then secretly attended Bohr's lecture. The next day, Oppenheimer met Bohr in person and stopped him from eating spoiled apples. Bohr was impressed by Oppenheimer's knowledge and research and encouraged him to pursue further education, which he felt was less restrictive. Oppenheimer begins his studies at the University of Göttingen, where he meets Isidore Rabbi David Krumholz and works on his doctoral dissertation. Together with Rabbi, they meet theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg, Matthias Schweihofer, whom Oppenheimer looks up to as an influential figure in his research. He then began teaching at Berkeley in the United States, where he was nicknamed Oppie by his colleagues, including Nobel laureate Ernest Lawrence, Josh Hartnett. Oppenheimer started the class with just one student of his, Giovanni Romanitz, Josh Zuckerman, but it later turned into a much more full class. Oppenheimer then attends a communist rally with his brother Frank Dillon Arnold and his girlfriend. There Oppenheimer meets Haakon Chevalier Jefferson Hall and becomes friends. He then meets Jean Tatlock Florence Pug and talks to her before putting her to bed. After sex, Jean searches her bookshelves and pulls out a Sanskrit book, which he asks Oppenheimer to translate. Oppenheimer goes to Los Alamos Ranch with Frank and Lawrence. Frank and his girlfriend formally join the Communist Party, but Oppenheimer refuses, even though he frowns on his left-leaning political views. He claims to support the Spanish Revolution, which Lawrence doubts. Oppenheimer is also a member of the Federation of Architects, Engineers, Chemists, and Engineers FEET, further fueling concerns that Oppenheimer was a communist. During an afternoon with Jean, Oppenheimer watches the despairing reaction of one of his students, Louis Alvarez Wolf, to the news that the Germans have split the uranium core by colliding neutrons through nuclear fission. Later, during a party with FEET, Oppenheimer learns about Hitler's invasion of Poland. Oppenheimer then meets Catherine Kitty Punning Emily Blunt, a communist whose marriage has already broken down. After separating from her husband, Kitty begins an affair with Oppenheimer, eventually marrying, and she becomes pregnant by Oppenheimer. He wants to break up with Jean, but she is upset even though Jean has previously tried to tell Oppenheimer that she doesn't want to continue her relationship. Kitty gives birth to her son Peter and becomes an alcoholic. The two leave Peter at Chevalier's house and go on an excursion. At college, Oppenheimer meets General Leslie Groves McDermott and Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Nichols Dane DeHaan, and is recruited to head the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb during World War II. Oppenheimer begins recruiting other scientists such as Richard Feynman, Jack Quaid, Kenneth Bainbridge, Josh Peck, Seth Neddermeyer, Devon Bostick, Lily Hornig, Olivia Thirlby, Romanitz, and Alvarez. They opened a store in Los Alamos and set up a mock town near the test site. Edward Teller Benny Safdie is summoned to examine the blueprints and components of the bomb, and Oppenheimer and his colleagues are appalled to discover that in the wrong hands, a hydrogen bomb more powerful than the atomic bomb could be built, setting off a chain reaction that could destroy the world. Further investigation lowers the chances to almost zero. Another flash forward shows Oppenheimer working with the Atomic Energy Commission to program a hydrogen bomb. After the Soviet atomic bomb test, the men meet with their colleagues. Both Strauss and Nichols are ardent anti-communists and discuss the idea that several communists were involved in the Manhattan Project. The security hearings discuss Chevalier's involvement as Oppenheimer tried to obtain information about the project on behalf of the Russians, an act of treason. Romanitz was drafted because of his involvement in left-wing politics and perceived risk. Things are further complicated during Oppenheimer's time on the project when he meets Colonel Boris Pashkasiafolk, the project's head of security and who also has anti-communist tendencies. Anti-communist attorney William Borden David Dustmalkin presents the hearing members with an indictment against Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's relationship with Jean is also questioned, with flashbacks revealing that he continued the relationship. While Kitty is in the room, he admits to having an affair and she imagines Jean having sex with her husband in front of her. In 1949, Jean overdosed and committed suicide by drowning in a bathtub. However, a brief glimpse of what appears to be her hand pushing her head into the water suggests that Jean may have been murdered and painted as a suicidal would-be. Kitty finds Oppenheimer collapsed in the woods after hearing the news, but he tells him to recover. At some point during the development of the project, Boer is brought to Los Alamos after being stranded in Europe due to the Nazi occupation. He contributed work on the project along with Oppenheimer and Teller. Boer tells Oppenheimer that he is giving mankind the power to destroy itself. After Hitler's death, the team continues the project knowing that the Japanese are continuing the war effort. The team conducts several bomb tests. Sometime later, they complete the bomb and prepare to begin what Oppenheimer calls the Trinity test. Everyone gathers at a safe distance at night to prepare for the outcome. The bomb explodes, creating a powerful mushroom cloud and subsequent shockwave. Oppenheimer repeats the sentence, "And now I am the destroyer of worlds, the Grim Reaper," and the team celebrates their success. Then President Harry Truman Gary Oldman dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the resulting casualties weighed heavily on Oppenheimer's conscience. He makes a speech in front of the whole team cheering him on, but imagines how the bomb will burn them all to the ground. Oppenheimer later meets Truman and initially congratulates him on developing the bomb, but when Oppenheimer says he is bleeding on his own hands, Truman calls him a crybaby and kicks him out. Years later, around the time of the Senate hearings, Strauss told his aides that Frank was blacklisted by all universities because he was a communist. Romanitz ended up working for the railways, and Chevalier went into exile. Oppenheimer began advocating an arms control program instead of a hydrogen bomb, which Truman opposed. Strauss also informed Oppenheimer that one of the Manhattan Project members, Klaus Fuchs Christopher Denham, was a Soviet spy and provided information on Soviet research and development. Oppenheimer's support to prevent further nuclear weapons development was rejected on Cold War grounds. Strauss also collaborates with Bowden and Nichols to further smear Oppenheimer. During the security hearing, Kitty rages that Oppenheimer tried to prevent her from appearing a martyr out of guilt over her creation. Oppenheimer is questioned by Roger Rob Jason Klock, while Teller, Rabbi, Groves and Pash testify about their time with Oppenheimer. Rob said he wanted to know where Oppenheimer's views on nuclear weapons development changed when he realized that the United States would use any weapon, at any cost, to win. Thanks to Teller and Groves, Oppenheimer is eventually deemed loyal to America, but his secrecy clearance is revoked and he loses his political clout. While Strauss is contesting the Senate seat, former engineer David Hill Romley Malik testifies against Strauss for taking action against Oppenheimer over personal grievances, including the moment Oppenheimer called Strauss better than a sandwich at a separate hearing. Strauss loses his chance in the Senate, and his aides, aware of his intentions, turn against him. The aide also told him that JFK had opposed Strauss' actions. We then see the conversation Oppenheimer has with Einstein before Strauss approaches them. Another flashback to their discussion shows Oppenheimer receiving the Enrico Fermi Award from President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1963. They discuss the implication that their research into nuclear weapons could have set off a chain reaction that would destroy the world. After that, Oppenheimer sees atomic bombs exploding all over the world, engulfing the Earth in fire and ash. The film moves through the life of the father of the atomic bomb, his Robert Oppenheimer, from different perspectives. While teaching at Berkeley, he was asked by General Leslie Groves to head the Manhattan Project to develop the bomb during World War II. Their efforts proved successful in the Trinity test, but after President Truman ordered the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer began to feel guilty about the atomic bomb victims. Oppenheimer became an advocate for further nuclear weapons development after his colleague Edward Teller discovered a way to develop a hydrogen bomb that was more powerful than an atomic bomb and could set off a chain reaction that would destroy the world. Oppenheimer was later embroiled in the security hearings because of his ties to communist circles, former members of which included his wife Kitty. He is also brought up in a relationship with Jean Tatlock. His secrecy clearance is eventually revoked and he loses his political clout. Meanwhile, Admiral Louis Strauss tries to turn Oppenheimer against him out of a personal grudge against him, but a former engineer testifies against Strauss, costing him his chances in the Senate. Towards the end of his life, Oppenheimer receives the Enrico Fermi Award, but the film ends with him fearing that his research into nuclear weapons could destroy the world.